Now, take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a scream for freedom that took years to escape. Imagine being handed over to someone who's meant to protect you, but instead watches as your life is destroyed. Every day, every year, trapped in fear while those who should save you do nothing. This is not just a story, it's my story. And tonight, I'm taking you inside the moments I ran, I survived, and I fought back when everyone else failed me. Stay with me, if you dare. I still remember the sound of the door locking behind me, a metallic click that echoed through my chest louder than in the room itself. It was 1999, and I was barely 11 years old, sitting on the edge of a mattress that smelled of damp walls and cigarette smoke. He stood there in the doorway, breathing heavily, his shirt half-buttoned, a shadow swallowing the light from the hallway. My mother was behind him. She wasn't crying, she wasn't screaming. She was just watching. Arms folded, face like stone, as if her silence could erase the truth of what was about to happen. That night, everything inside me collapsed. I wanted to scream her name, but my throat locked up like cement. The betrayal hit deeper than the fear of him. She had promised me safety, whispered prayers at night when the lights were off, kissed my forehead as if she believed in God's protection. And yet there she was, handing me over without a word. I lost count of how many nights repeated that same pattern. His heavy steps, the suffocating silence, her absence disguised as presence. Years folded into one another like crumpled pages, until time became just a blur of locked doors, muffled cries, and a growing ache inside my chest that never healed. I learned to stop begging. I learned to stop believing in rescue. The air itself became my only witness. It wasn't just the nights. The days had their own cruelty. At school, I carried bruises hidden under long sleeves, my body stiff and aching while teachers asked questions I never answered. "Are you okay?" they'd say, tilting their heads with the kind of curiosity that never crossed the line into action. I mastered the art of lying with a smile. "I'm fine," the same to words that felt like swallowing glass every time they left my mouth. Years of sacrifice followed sacrifices no child should ever make. I sacrificed my laughter, my innocence, my trust in love. I grew up fast, working small jobs at 14 just to save a few coins, hiding them in a tin can under my bed. Every coin was a symbol, a whisper that maybe one day I could escape. Meanwhile, my mother manipulated me with her voice soft and cutting. "He gives us a roof. He feeds us. Do you want us to starve?" She made survival sound like a gift he granted, not a right we deserved. And I believed her for a long time, even when it felt like dying slowly. The worst part wasn't the violence, it was the impossible choice she demanded of me. "You must forgive him," she said one morning, handing me breakfast as if forgiveness could be served on a plate with burnt toast. "If you forgive, everything will be lighter. We can be a family again." That word family rotted inside me. How could I forgive the man who stole my nights, the man whose shadow still shook my bones? How could I forgive the woman who stood there, watching, doing nothing? But I tried. God knows I tried. I prayed in secret, begged heaven for strength, for peace, for silence in my head. I told myself if I obeyed, if I stayed quiet, if I survived one more year, maybe things would change. Maybe lies could become truth if repeated enough times. But then came the day everything shattered, the day the lie revealed itself, and I saw the cracks in the story she had fed me for years. It started with a bill. An envelope half open on the kitchen table, numbers scribbled in red, a total of 4,870 reals. I was 16 by then, tall enough to reach the top shelves, strong enough to carry more than just fear. I picked it up and saw his name printed clearly, not as a provider but as a debtor. The roof she said he gave us. It wasn't his at all. The rent was overdue. The electricity bill was 3 months late. The food, the clothes, the little we had, it wasn't him paying for it. It was me. My jobs. My stolen coins. My silence. That discovery lit a fire in me I couldn't contain. Years of manipulation, years of sacrifice for a story that was nothing but a lie. He wasn't the savior she painted. He wasn't the provider. He was nothing but a predator, and she was his accomplice. And that was the moment everything began to turn. The night after I found the bill, I couldn't sleep. My hands kept shaking as I held that envelope under the blanket, tracing the numbers with my finger like they were carved into my skin. For real's sake 70. It wasn't just debt, it was proof. Proof that every word my mother had whispered, every justification she had thrown at me, every manipulative plea she had used to keep me quiet, it was all built on lies. For years, I had believed that silence meant survival, that my obedience was the only thing standing between us and the street. But now, staring at those overdue balances, I realized survival had never been the issue. Control was. He didn't give us shelter, he held us hostage. And she wasn't protecting me, she was protecting herself. That morning, the sun barely cutting through the torn curtains, I confronted her. My voice was low, almost trembling, but sharp enough to slice through the air. You said he paid for everything. You said without him we'd starve. She froze by the sink, her hands deep in soapy water, shoulders stiff like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. She didn't turn to look at me when she said, "You don't understand. You're just a child, a child." I wanted to scream. By then, I was 16, already working after school, cleaning offices downtown for 300 reals a month, scrubbing toilets that smelled of bleach and sweat until my fingers cracked. I wasn't a child when I dragged home groceries, when I patched holes in my sneakers with tape, when I watched her close the bedroom door behind her while he followed. But suddenly, in her mouth, I was a child too small to question, too naive to see. Her refusal to admit the truth burned worse than his touch. It was like drowning and watching the one person who could pull you out fold her arms and let you sink. I left the kitchen before my rage could spill into words I couldn't take back. But that night, lying awake with the sound of his snores rumbling through the wall, I made a promise to myself I would leave. Not someday. Not when things got better. I would leave as soon as I had enough to run. From that moment, every coin I saved wasn't just money, it was my ticket out. I stopped hiding it in the tin under my bed, afraid he'd find it. Instead, I stitched a small pocket inside my school backpack, just big enough for folded bills. Every week, no matter how tired, no matter how hungry, I put something aside. $10, 20 reals, sometimes 50 reals when I picked up extra shifts. My body ached, but my hope sharpened. Still, she didn't stop. My mother's words became sharper, her manipulation more desperate. She would corner me in the hallway, eyes wet but not with sorrow, with calculation. "He's not that bad. You're exaggerating. If you tell anyone, they'll take me away too. Do you want us to be separated forever?" Guilt became her weapon, her most powerful chain. And sometimes, in the darkness of those nights, I almost believed her. Almost. The turning point came on a Sunday afternoon. The sky outside was heavy with rain, the air thick with humidity that clung to the walls. He was drinking, as usual, his glass of cheap kashoka leaving rings on the wooden table. My mother sat across from him, silent, staring at her hands. Then he spoke, his voice slurred, but his words clear enough to pierce. "She belongs to me. You know that, right?" I felt my heart drop like a stone into my stomach. For the first time, I saw her reaction, not shock, not anger, not even shame, just silence. A silence so loud it screamed. And in that silence, I understood she had given me away long before I even realized. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't pray. I just packed a small bag in my mind, imaginary clothes, imaginary coins, imaginary courage, and rehearsed my escape. Over and over, like a scene in a movie I would one day live. The streets outside weren't safe. I knew that. I had heard stories of girls disappearing, of worse men waiting in the shadows. But even the unknown felt safer than another night under that roof. 2 months later, the chance came. It was August 2004, the air still heavy with winter chill. I had saved 1,280 reals by then, tucked neatly inside my backpack. He had gone out drinking with his friends, my mother dozing in front of the TV, cigarette smoke curling into the dim light. My heart pounded like a drum as I slipped on my sneakers, the soles worn thin, but still strong enough to carry me away. I stood by the door for a long time, my hand on the rusty handle, my whole body trembling. The walls seemed to lean in, whispering lies, reminding me of the years I had survived, asking if I really thought I could outrun them. And then I heard her voice, my mother's, soft, almost drowsy. "Where are you going?" For a moment, I froze. I could have lied. I could have gone back to my room, buried myself in the mattress, waited for another day. But instead, I turned. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were empty, not even surprised, as if she knew this moment was inevitable. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out anyway. "Anywhere but here," and with that, I opened the door. The first breath I took outside that door felt like fire and ice all at once. My lungs expanded as if I had been holding my breath for years, and yet the air was so cold it stabbed through my chest. It was just past midnight, the streets of our neighborhood empty except for the hum of a broken street lamp buzzing like an insect. I clutched my backpack tight against me, the hidden bills pressed flat like a secret heartbeat. Every step away from that house was a war between terror and freedom. I had never been outside at night alone before. The city felt different in the dark, more alive, more dangerous. Shadows stretched long across the cracked pavement, and stray dogs barked in the distance. My sneakers slapped against the ground, each sound too loud, as if the entire world could hear I was running. My heart raced with the fear that at any moment he might return, drunk and angry, drag me back inside by my hair. I walked faster, then ran, the tears streaming down my face, blurring the yellow glow of the streetlights. I didn't have a plan, just a direction. Downtown. I knew the buses ran all night there, and if I could get far enough, maybe no one would find me. I had memorized the bus routes from my after-school jobs, tracing the maps while cleaning office desks, pretending I was planning a trip I'd never take. But now those maps unfolded in my mind like a lifeline. When I finally reached the bus station, my hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the money as I paid. 3.5 reals. The driver barely looked at me, just waved me through, his tired eyes fixed on the road. I slid into a seat at the back, my backpack clutched to my chest, trying to make myself invisible. The bus smelled of diesel and wet clothes, a mix of sweat and rainwater dripping from the ceiling. For the first time in years, I felt untethered. I wasn't safe yet, but I wasn't his anymore. The city passed by outside the window, neon signs flickering over shuttered shops, alleys littered with broken bottles, silhouettes of strangers moving like ghosts. I wondered if any of them could see me, if they knew I was just a girl running from a nightmare, carrying nothing but a few bills and a fragile hope. I got off in the center of Sao Paulo just as dawn began to break, the sky bleeding from black into gray. The street smelled of fresh bread from early bakeries, mixed with the stench of garbage left out overnight. I had 1,276 reals left, and for the first time, I felt the weight of what that money meant. It wasn't just cash, it was time. Each coin, each bill, a borrowed hour, a borrowed day of survival before the world caught up with me. I wondered until I found a cheap boarding house near Proca da Esse. The man at the counter barely lifted his eyes when I handed him 20 reals for a night. The room was tiny, the mattress stained, the single light bulb flickering overhead. But it was mine. Mine. No locked door from the outside, no footsteps approaching, no eyes watching. I dropped my backpack on the floor and collapsed onto the bed, my whole body trembling with exhaustion. For the first time in years, I slept without fear of waking to his shadow. But freedom has its own kind of hunger. By the third day, the money I spent on bread and bus fares gnawed at my total, shrinking the little I had saved. Panic crept in every time I unfolded another bill. Survival wasn't just leaving, it was staying gone. And to do that, I needed more than coins. I needed work. I found my first job by sheer desperation. A cafe on Rue Augusta, the kind where businessmen grabbed their morning coffee before heading to offices. I begged the owner, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a smoker's cough, to let me wash dishes. "I'll take anything," I whispered, my hands shaking so badly she probably thought I was on drugs. She gave me a look, long, suspicious, but finally nodded. 200 reals a week. Cash. No questions. Those nights I scrubbed dishes until my hands cracked, the hot water burning cuts I didn't even know I had. During the day, I cleaned tables, carried trays, smiled at strangers who never once looked me in the eye. My back ached, my feet blistered, but every real I earned was another brick in the wall between me and him. And yet, no matter how far I went, no matter how many streets separated me from that house, his voice followed me. In the quiet hours, while rinsing plates or walking back to the boarding house through damp streets, I heard him. "She belongs to me." The words replayed like a broken tape, poisoning even the air I breathed. I tried to drown it out with the noise of the city, the honking cars, the shouting vendors, the endless rhythm of footsteps. But at night, in that flickering room, silence pressed in, and I wondered if I would ever really be free. Still, I held on, because no matter how loud his voice echoed in my mind, there was another whisper buried beneath it. My own, faint, fragile, but growing stronger. "You're gone. You made it out. Keep going." And for the first time in my life, I believed myself. The city became my cage and my sanctuary at once. By day, I was just another face in the crowd, an anonymous girl in a cafe apron, wiping tables and balancing trays. By night, I was a fugitive, counting every coin like it was a weapon, every minute like it could be my last before someone recognized me. I kept my head down, avoided eye contact, never stayed too long in the same place. Still, every time a door opened behind me, my body tensed, expecting his shadow to step through. I told myself that as long as I kept moving, he couldn't find me. But fear has a way of multiplying. Even the smallest things could break me. The way a man's laugh echoed in the cafe, too deep, too familiar. The sound of keys jangling in someone's pocket. A hand brushing past me in the crowd. My heart would seize, my stomach twisting into knots, my breath caught between escape and collapse. I was free, but my body hadn't learned it yet. If you're still here listening to this painful truth, it means you feel the weight of what so many endure in silence. So please don't stop now, subscribe, leave a like, and share this video. Every action you take helps this story reach someone who might still be trapped, waiting for a reason to run, waiting for a sign that they're not alone. Together, we can turn silence into strength and darkness into light. Weeks passed. I lived on cheap bread, watery soup, and endless cups of coffee from the cafe. My room was barely big enough to stretch my arms, but it was mine. And still, every time I handed over money for rent, I felt the walls close in tighter. My 1,200 reals melted quickly. Rent was 300 reals a month. Food another 200 reals. What I earned barely replaced what slipped through my fingers. Freedom, I realized, wasn't free, it had a price tag, and I was barely keeping up with the payments. It was around this time that my mother found me. I don't know how she did it. Maybe she followed me one night, or maybe someone from the neighborhood recognized me in the cafe. All I know is that one evening, as I was wiping down tables before closing, I looked up and there she was standing in the doorway, her thin frame wrapped in a grey shawl, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. My chest froze. The rag slipped from my hand and landed in the bucket with a splash. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All I saw was betrayal. All I heard was silence. She had given me away, watched as he took everything from me, and now she stood there like a ghost summoned from the life I had buried. "Please," she whispered when I didn't move. Her voice cracked, softer than I remembered, almost broken. "Please, just listen." I wanted to scream at her, to throw the bucket at her feet, to tell her she had no right to be here. But instead, I stood frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. My boss glanced between us but said nothing, only nodded toward the door as if telling me to handle it outside. We stepped into the alley, the air heavy with the stench of garbage and rain. She reached for me, but I flinched back. Her hand trembled in the space between us, suspended like a question neither of us could answer. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice hoarse. "We had nothing. He gave us." "Don't," I snapped. My voice cracked, but the anger inside me burned hotter than the shame. "Don't you dare say he gave us anything." Her lips pressed together, her eyes shining in the dim light. "You don't understand." "No." The word ripped from my throat, louder than I meant. "I understand perfectly. You let him. You stood there and you let him. And you called it survival." She crumbled then, her shoulders shaking as tears spilled down her face. For the first time, I saw her cry not the quiet, manipulative tears she had used to control me, but raw, broken sobs that echoed against the alley walls. Part of me wanted to collapse with her, to sink into her arms and pretend she was still my mother. But another part of me, the part that had clawed its way out of that house, that had carried me through empty streets at midnight, kept me standing. "I came to warn you," she said finally, her voice shaking. "He's looking for you. He knows you left. He's angry. Please just be careful." Her words lodged like shards of glass in my chest. I wanted to hate her, and I did. But beneath the hate was something worse, the echo of the child in me still wanting to believe she cared. I turned away before she could see the tears welling in my eyes. "You should have warned me years ago." I walked back into the cafe without looking at her again. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the flickering light of my rented room, staring at the ceiling, her words replaying like a curse. "He's looking for you." Every creak of the floorboards, every shout from the street below, sent my body into panic. I pressed my backpack against my chest, the money hidden inside, and whispered to myself over and over, "He won't find me. He won't." But deep down, I wasn't sure. The nights after her warning stretched longer than I thought possible. Every sound outside my door turned into a threat. The slam of a car door, the shuffle of footsteps on the stairs, the murmur of voices drifting up from the street, all of it made my skin crawl. Sleep became impossible. I lay in bed with my shoes on, my backpack clutched to my chest, ready to run at the first sign of danger. I tried to convince myself she had been lying, exaggerating to pull me back into her world of guilt and manipulation. But the way her voice trembled when she said, "He's looking for you," kept circling in my head. She wasn't lying this time. I knew it. He was out there, hunting me like I was something he owned that had slipped from his grasp. A week later, I saw proof. It was a Saturday afternoon, the cafe buzzing with customers, plates clattering, the smell of strong coffee and buttered bread thick in the air. I was carrying a tray of empty cups when I noticed him. He was across the street, leaning against a lamppost, cigarette smoke curling around his head like a crown of ash. He wasn't looking at me directly, but he didn't have to. I felt it, his presence pressing into me, suffocating. My hands shook so violently the cups rattled on the tray, and I had to set it down before they shattered. I ducked into the kitchen, my chest heaving. My boss frowned. "What's wrong with you?" But I couldn't answer. My throat was locked tight, my body trapped between fight and flight. By the time I dared to glance outside again, he was gone. Only the cigarette but remained, glowing faintly on the sidewalk. That night, I packed everything I owned into my backpack to shirts, one pair of jeans, a toothbrush, the money I had scraped together. I didn't care if I had nowhere to go. Staying meant being found. And being found meant the end of me. I moved into another boarding house, smaller and dirtier, further away from the cafe. It was 250 reals a month, cash only, no questions asked. The mattress was so thin I could feel the springs in my back, and the walls were so damp I woke to the smell of mold. But at least it was somewhere new, somewhere he didn't know. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later, as I walked home from a late shift, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy measured, following me too closely. My pulse quickened, the sound of my sneakers slapping the pavement mixing with the echo of his boots. I turned a corner sharply, ducking into a side street, but the steps followed. Faster now, closer. I broke into a run. My lungs burned, my legs pumping as I darted past shuttered shops and piles of trash. My backpack bounced against me, the money inside rustling like a reminder of everything I had to lose. I didn't look back, didn't dare, until I slipped into the doorway of a bakery and pressed myself flat against the wall. The footsteps passed, fading into the distance. My chest heaved, my ears ringing with the rush of blood. When I finally stepped back onto the street, it was empty. Whoever it was, him, or someone he had sent, had vanished into the night. I knew then I couldn't just keep running. Running wasn't enough. He would always be one step behind, waiting for me to stumble. I needed something stronger. Protection. A way to fight back. The next morning, I went to the police station on Avenida Tiradentes. The building smelled of sweat and old paper, the kind of place where time moved slower than anywhere else. I sat on a hard wooden bench, waiting for hours until a tired-looking officer finally called me over. My voice shook as I told him my story, everything, from the nights locked in that room to the moment I ran. He didn't write much down. He didn't even look me in the eye. When I finished, he shrugged. "You're 16. If you want to file something, you'll need an adult with you." A parent, I almost laughed, a parent. The same woman who had handed me over, who had told me forgiveness was the only way to survive. I left the station before he could say another word, my throat tight with rage. That was the moment I realized I was truly alone. But even in the sharpest loneliness, a fire began to grow in me. If no one would save me, I would save myself. I would work harder, save more, disappear further into the cracks of the city until even his shadow couldn't reach me. My body ached, my mind frayed, but my will sharpened like a blade. I didn't know it then, but that decision, the choice to rely only on myself, would lead me into places even darker than the house I escaped. Because the city doesn't give freedom for free, it asks for sacrifices. And I was about to pay the highest price yet. I thought I had already given everything I could: my childhood, my innocence, my trust. But the city has a way of demanding more. Freedom wasn't about leaving that house, it was about surviving without falling back into the same chains. And survival came with a price. After the police turned me away, something inside me hardened. I stopped expecting help. I stopped believing in saviors. If no one would protect me, then I would build my own armor, no matter the cost. The cafe job barely kept me afloat, and with rent swallowing half of my wages, I realized I needed more. More hours, more money, more risk. That's how I found myself cleaning bars at night. It started with a man named Eduardo, one of the cafe's regulars. He was in his 30s, with slicked back hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. One evening, as I cleared his table, he leaned closer and said, "You want to make real money? Come to Rua Fry Coneca after dark. There's always work." I knew better than to trust him, but hunger doesn't leave much room for wisdom. 2 nights later, I followed his directions and found a bar with neon lights buzzing overhead, the bass of music thumping through the walls. The air smelled of beer, smoke, and something heavier, something dangerous. They didn't ask for my age. They didn't care. As long as I scrubbed floors and emptied ashtrays, they paid me cash at the end of the night. 70 reals for 5 hours. It felt like a fortune compared to the cafe. I told myself it was worth it. That the risk didn't matter if it meant I could build a future. But the bar was another kind of prison. Men grabbed my arm as I passed, their eyes crawling over me, their laughter sharp and cruel. "Smile, Garota," they'd say, their words dripping with beer and venom. I kept my head down, my hands moving fast, my mind somewhere else. But inside, I was always bracing, waiting for one of them to step too close, to lock the door, to turn this new chapter into the same nightmare I thought I had escaped. The owner, a man everyone called Zeka, watched me closely. He was in his 50s, thick hands covered in rings, his belly stretching the buttons of his shirt. One night, after I finished cleaning, he counted the bills slowly, holding them just out of my reach. "You work hard," he said, his eyes narrowing. "But hard work isn't enough. You want to stay here, you'll need to prove you're loyal." The way he said it sent ice down my spine. I snatched the money from his hand before he could say more and ran into the night. The city air was damp, thick with the smell of rain on concrete, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that bar. Still, I went back the next night. And the night after. Because money was survival, and survival meant swallowing fear again and again until it burned in my stomach like acid. I told myself it was temporary, that once I saved enough, I would leave Sao Paulo altogether, maybe head to Rio, or even further. Somewhere he'd never find me, somewhere I could start over. But then August came, and with it, another twist I wasn't prepared for. It was a Sunday morning, the cafe almost empty, when I saw her again. My mother. She looked thinner, her hair streaked with more grey, her eyes sunken deep into her face. She sat at a table near the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. When I approached, she didn't smile. "He's worse now," she whispered, before I could even speak. "Drinking more. Looking for you every night. He says if I don't tell him where you are, he'll..." She stopped, her lips trembling. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want her words lodged in my chest like another poison. But she kept going. "You don't understand what he's capable of. Running won't save you forever." I slammed the rug on the table, my voice breaking. "And staying did. Staying destroyed me. Staying killed me every night. Don't you dare tell me running won't save me." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was something else there to fear, desperation, maybe even regret. "Then let me help you," she said softly. "Let me do one thing right." For a moment, the child inside me almost believed her. Almost. But the scars on my skin and the echoes in my head reminded me what her help had cost before. I shook my head. "It's too late." I walked away before she could answer, before I could fall into the same trap of believing her lies. That night, back in my room, I opened my backpack and counted the bills again, 2,340 reals. Every coin hard-earned, every note stained with sweat, fear, and silence. It was enough to get me out of Sao Paulo. Maybe not far, but far enough to breathe. I told myself I would leave within the month, that I would vanish into another city, another name, another life. But life never waits for our plans. Because 3 nights later, I came home to find my door wide open. The sight of that open door froze me where I stood. My heart pounded so loud I swore the whole building could hear it. The hallway smelled of mildew and fried oil from a neighbor's dinner, but all I could taste was fear, metallic and bitter in my mouth. I tightened my grip on my backpack strap, every instinct screaming at me to run. But my money, my clothes, my life, everything I had fought for was inside that room. The hallway stretched like a tunnel, and the dim light flickered above me as I stepped closer. The door creaked with the faintest breeze, swinging back and forth as if mocking me. I pressed my ear against the frame, holding my breath. Silence. No footsteps. No voices. Just the hum of the city leaking in through the cracked window. I pushed the door open. The room had been torn apart. My mattress was flipped, stuffing spilling from a gash down the middle. My few shirts and jeans lay scattered across the floor, pockets turned inside out. Even the toothbrush I had left on the sink was gone. But what shattered me wasn't the mess, it was the backpack, my hiding place. I had left it under the mattress, the money stitched carefully inside the lining. Now the lining was ripped open, the bills gone, 2,340 reals gone, just like that. I collapsed to my knees, my hands trembling as I clawed through the remains, praying maybe one bill had slipped, one coin had rolled beneath the bed. Nothing, whoever it was, they had taken everything. A cold realization crept up my spine. This wasn't a random theft. No one in this building knew about the hidden pocket. Only one person did. My mother. For hours I sat on the floor, surrounded by torn fabric and silence, the truth slicing deeper than any blade. She had found me again. And this time, she hadn't come to warn me. She had come to strip me of the one thing I had left my chance at escape. Anger surged through me like fire, hotter than fear, hotter than grief. For years I had blamed him for everything. But in that moment, I saw it clearly. She was not just a bystander. She was part of it. She had been all along. I packed what little remained, one shirt, a cracked comb, my cracked skin and broken trust, and walked out without looking back. The landlord shouted something about rent, but I didn't stop. I had nothing left to give. Not to him, not to her, not to anyone. For the next few nights, I wandered. I slept on benches, in bus stations, beneath overpasses that smelled of piss and gasoline. The city was no longer a hiding place. It was a beast with teeth, and I was bleeding. Every night I lay awake, clutching the straps of my empty backpack, feeling the void where my money used to be. Hunger gnawed at me, fear stalked me, but rage kept me moving. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was early morning, the sky still bruised with the last traces of night. I was curled on the steps of a church near Procada Republica, shivering in the damp cold, when a man approached. He was in his late 20s, dressed in a black jacket, his hair slick with gel. He crouched beside me, his voice smooth to smooth. "You shouldn't sleep out here. It's dangerous. Men like you don't want to meet, they come at night." I pulled my knees tighter, ready to bolt, but he held up his hands. "Easy, I'm not like them. I know a place where you can stay, warm bed, food, work, if you want it." His words slid into my ears like honey, but underneath, I heard the trap. Still, the hunger in my stomach screamed louder than my fear. My voice cracked when I asked, "What kind of work?" He smiled, not answering right away, his eyes flicking over me in a way that made my skin crawl. "The kind that pays better than washing dishes." I should have run. Every instinct told me to, but exhaustion weighed me down, the memory of my ripped mattress and stolen money burning in my chest. I told myself I could leave if it felt wrong. I told myself I had nothing left to lose. So I followed him. We walked through narrow streets, past shuttered stores and alleys that smelled of rot. Finally, we stopped in front of a building with boarded-up windows and graffiti scrawled across the walls. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and perfume, laughter echoing from upstairs. Women leaned against the walls, their dresses too bright, their smiles too sharp. And in that moment, I understood exactly what kind of work he meant. I froze, bile rising in my throat. But before I could turn, his hand gripped my arm, firm and cold. "This is survival," he said, his smile gone now, replaced by something harder. "You'll thank me later." I yanked my arm free and stumbled back, my chest heaving. My body screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The women watched with empty eyes, some pitying, some mocking, none offering help. Finally, I forced myself to step back, then another, then turn and run into the street. His voice followed me, sharp and angry now. "You'll be back. You all come back." I didn't stop running until my lungs burned, until the world blurred around me, until I collapsed against a wall, sobbing into my empty hands. Freedom had brought me here to hunger, to danger, to the edge of another prison. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe he had been right. Maybe I did belong to him. Maybe escape was nothing more than an illusion. But even in that moment, broken and empty, another voice rose inside me. Faint, stubborn, defiant. No, not like this. Not ever again. I wandered the streets for 2 more days after that night, the echo of his voice chasing me in every shadow. "You'll be back," it repeated in my head, taunting me, daring me to surrender. Hunger gnawed deeper, sharp enough to bend my body, and sleep came only in fractured pieces beneath bridges and bus stops. The city no longer looked like freedom, it looked like a labyrinth built to crush me. On the 3rd day, I sat on the curb of Avenida Saudiro, watching cars rush by in a blur of headlights. The smell of roasted corn and fried pasties from a street cart made my stomach clench, but I had no coins, not even a crumpled note. My throat burned with thirst. I could barely feel my legs anymore. And still, I whispered to myself, not like this. Not ever again. It was then that I saw the bookstore. A small, dusty place sandwiched between a laundromat and a pharmacy. The window was cluttered with old paperbacks, sun-faded and curling at the edges. Something about it pulled me closer, like a magnet. I stepped inside, the bell over the door chimming softly. The smell hit me first: paper, ink, dust, and something warm, like wood polish. Rows of shelves stretched into the dim space, and behind the counter sat a man with silver hair and glasses that slipped down his nose. He looked up at me, and instead of the suspicion I had grown used to, there was something gentler in his gaze. "You look like you need somewhere to sit," he said quietly. I hesitated, words tangled in my throat. Finally, I nodded. He motioned to a chair near the counter, and I sank into it, my body trembling from exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, I felt invisible in the best way. No one was looking to hurt me, or use me, or take something from me. He slid a glass of water across the counter. I drank it in desperate gulps, and when I finished, he placed a piece of bread wrapped in paper beside me. I stared at it, then at him. He didn't say a word. He just went back to sorting a stack of books. I ate slowly, almost ritualistically, my body waking up with every bite. And as I chewed, my eyes wandered the shelves. Titles I had never seen before. Stories from faraway lands, histories of wars and revolutions, poetry that promised worlds beyond the one I knew. For hours I sat there, reading fragments, losing myself in sentences that seemed to breathe life back into me. Words that reminded me I wasn't just a body to be owned or a mistake to be erased. I was still human. I was still here. The old man didn't ask questions. He didn't demand explanations. He only said, "Come back tomorrow if you'd like. The books will be here." I did. And the day after that. And the next. Soon the bookstore became my refuge. I swept the floors in exchange for tea and bread, stacked books for a few coins, and sometimes, when the shop was quiet, I would sit on the floor and let the words wash over me. The city outside was still chaos, still dangerous, but inside those walls, I was safe. And yet, safety didn't erase the past. It only gave me space to see it more clearly. It was there, between shelves of forgotten novels, that I began to piece together the truth. My mother hadn't just been complicit, she had chosen her role. She had handed me over, again and again, not because she was powerless, but because she refused to see me as hers. I wasn't her son. I was her bargaining chip. Her silence had been her weapon, sharper than his fists. I remember one night, sitting cross-legged on the cold floor, a philosophy book open in my lap. The words blurred as memories pressed against me, his hand gripping my shoulder, her eyes turning away, the weight of that open door when I returned to my room to find my savings gone. For so long, I had clung to the hope that maybe she hadn't known, maybe she had been blind, maybe she had been trapped too. But the books whispered a harsher truth. People reveal themselves not in their words, but in their choices. And she had chosen. The realization didn't crush me the way I expected. Instead, it burned through me like fire, cleansing and brutal. If she had chosen him over me, then I could choose me over both of them. For the first time, I felt something like freedom, not in running, not in hiding, but in knowing I no longer owe them anything. Not even hate. The old man must have seen the change in me. One evening, as he locked the front door, he looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "You don't have to carry it forever, you know. Some burdens are meant to be set down." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But part of me still clung to the weight, as if letting it go would erase the proof of what I had survived. That night, I dreamed of the open door again. But this time, when I stepped inside, the room wasn't torn apart. The mattress was whole, the backpack untouched. And instead of fear, I felt a strange calm. As if my mind was telling me, the door doesn't define you anymore. You walked through it, and you're still standing. When I woke, the first rays of dawn cutting through the bookstore window, I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. For the first time since I ran, I allowed myself to imagine a future. Not just surviving, living. It was on a Wednesday afternoon when the past finally found me again. The bookstore was quiet, dust motes drifting in the shafts of sunlight that cut through the windows. I was sweeping the back aisle when I heard the bell over the door. I didn't look up at first. Customers came and went, most barely noticing me. But then I heard a voice. A voice I hadn't heard in months, yet one that could slice through me in an instant. Duo, I froze. My fingers tightened around the broom handle until my knuckles went white. My chest felt like it had caved in, like the air had been punched out of me. Slowly, against every instinct screaming run, I lifted my head. She stood there. My mother. Her hair was shorter, streaked with grey, her face thinner, lines deeper. But her eyes, those eyes that had once looked at me without seeing me, were the same, cold, calculating. And behind her, at the threshold, was a shadow I would know anywhere. Him. My blood turned to ice. The bookstore, my sanctuary, suddenly shrank into a cage. The shelves loomed too close, the exit impossibly far. My legs refused to move. The old man at the counter looked up, adjusting his glasses, his expression calm but alert. He glanced at me, then at them, sensing the crackling tension in the air. But he didn't interfere. Not yet. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. "You've made it hard to find you," she said softly, almost like praise. Almost. I wanted to scream, to throw the broom at her, to collapse into the floor. Instead, my voice came out hoarse and broken. "Why are you here?" Her lips curved into something between a smile and a sneer. "You know why. He wants you back." My vision blurred. My ears filled with a rushing sound, like ocean waves crashing against my skull. I looked past her, at him, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, his mouth set in that cruel smirk I remembered too well. His presence alone dragged me backward in time, back to locked rooms, back to whispers in the dark, back to her silence. No, the word slipped out before I could stop it. Weak but real. "I'm not going back." Her eyes hardened. "Don't be stupid. You can't survive out here. Look at you, you're nothing. You think stacking books will save you. He can give you what you need. Shelter. Money. Family. Family." The word hit me like poison. My throat burned with it. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. "I'd rather starve on the street than be his again," I said, louder this time, my voice cracking. For a moment, silence. Her face flickered, something like shock passing through it, quickly replaced by fury. She glanced back at him, and I caught the smallest nod he gave her, approval. As if she was still his messenger, his weapon. She took another step closer, lowering her voice. "You owe us. Don't forget who kept you alive all those years." Alive. The word twisted like a knife. My chest heaved, my heart hammering, and I finally snapped, "Alive? You call that alive?" Watching while my voice broke. I swallowed the rest, choking on it, tears stinging my eyes. The old man behind the counter stood then. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene. He simply said, "I think you should leave." Her head snapped toward him, her mouth opening in protest. But something in his gaze, steady, unyielding, stopped her. She sneered, muttered something under her breath, and turned back to me. "This isn't over," she hissed. "He always gets what he wants," and then she was gone. The door closed, the bell chimed, and the silence that followed felt like the aftermath of an earthquake. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. The old man knelt beside me, his hand light on my shoulder. "Breathe," he said gently. "Just breathe." I tried. Inhale. Exhale. The air scraped my lungs like broken glass, but I forced it in, forced it out. Slowly, the world steadied, though the terror still pulsed in my veins. "They'll find me again," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "They always do." He shook his head. "Not if you choose differently this time. Running isn't enough. You need to stand." The word stand echoed inside me. Stand. Not flee. Not hide. Stand. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of the bookstore, staring at the shadows stretching across the ceiling. Every memory, every scar, every stolen moment of my childhood pressed against me, threatening to suffocate. But beneath it all, something else stirred. A defiance that had survived every beating, every betrayal, every night on the street. Maybe he was right, he always got what he wanted. But for the first time in my life, I realized he hadn't gotten everything. He hadn't broken me completely. And now I had something he couldn't touch. Choice. The next morning, as the first light bled across the city, I knew what I had to do. Not just survive. Not just escape, confront. It was the only way the chain would break. The decision had been made the night before, when the city was still cloaked in darkness and the streets smelled of rain and asphalt. I didn't know exactly how I would do it. I didn't know if I could. But I knew I had to face them not as the scared child who would run through alleys at midnight, but as the person I had become. Hardened, vigilant, alive. I walked to her apartment first. The building loomed, familiar yet alien. Every step up the staircase echoed my heartbeat. When I reached her door, I paused, hand trembling over the knob. The years of fear, manipulation, and betrayal pressed against me, heavy enough to make me want to turn and flee. But I gritted my teeth. No, not this time. She answered on the first knock, her face a mask of surprise and irritation. "Oh, what are you doing here?" I stepped inside before she could stop me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor underneath. I saw the old habits flare in her eyes, the calculations, the deflections, but I pressed on. "You need to be honest with me." "All of it," she faltered, then closed the door, leaning against it as if the weight of the conversation had already begun to crush her. "There's nothing to tell." I did what I had to do to survive. Her words ignited a fury I hadn't felt since the first night he took me. "No, you didn't survive. You gave me away. Again and again. You watched. You chose him over me every time. And now you'll have to live with that truth because I won't run anymore." Her face paled, the anger and arrogance slipping for the first time. She looked at me as though she'd never seen me before, as though she were finally recognizing the person I had become. I left her there, words hanging between us like broken glass, and made my way to him. The streets were quieter now, the hum of the city muted against my resolve. Every step toward his building was a step into the nightmare I had lived for years. But the difference now was that I carried something he never would: choice, memory, and a fire that no fear could extinguish. When I reached the door, I didn't knock. I pushed it open, and there he was, lounging in the dim light, smirk frozen on his face as if he had been expecting me all along. Well, look who decided to come back," he said, voice oily with amusement. I swallowed my fear, feeling the years of pain, betrayal, and survival harden into steel inside me. "I'm not here for games," I said, stepping forward, eyes locked on his. "I'm here to end this." For a moment, he laughed. A low, dangerous sound that made the room shrink around me. "End this, you little duo." I ignored the mockery. I had rehearsed this for years in my mind, not the fear, not the trembling, not the escape, but the confrontation. I listed every moment, every lie, every night he and my mother had tried to take me. The memory of stolen years, lost innocence, and the impossible choices pressed against me, fueling my words. "You don't own me," I said. "You never did. Every step I took, every night I survived, I did it without you. I'm done being afraid. I'm done running. You can try to follow me, threaten me, but you can't break me. Not anymore." The room went silent. He leaned back, the smirk faltering for the first time. My mother's face flashed in my memory, her fear, her complicity, her silence, and I realized something profound. They had spent years trying to shape me, control me, steal me, and in doing so, they had only forged the very thing they sought to destroy, my resilience. He rose slowly, and I braced for the familiar wave of terror, but it didn't come. Instead, he studied me like I was no longer the child he had taken for granted. His shadow, once so long and suffocating, shrank under the weight of my defiance. "You've changed," he said finally, voice low, almost grudging. "You're not the same." "No," I said, feeling every scar, every bruise, every stolen moment in my body as proof. "I'm not. And you won't control me again." I walked out of that apartment, and this time there was no fear chasing me down the stairwell, no echo of his voice in my ears, no looming shadow over my shoulders. The city stretched before me, harsh, chaotic, but mine to navigate. Later, I sat on a bench in a park, the wind brushing my hair, the first real sun of spring warming my face. I thought about the years I had survived, the impossible choices I had been forced to make, and the truth I had uncovered, that freedom is never just given. It is taken, claimed, and fought for in the silence of our hearts when no one is watching. I closed my eyes and let myself feel it, the grief, the rage, the triumph. I had been broken, but I was whole enough now to recognize that survival was not just enduring, it was living, truly living. And for the first time, I allowed myself to hope, because surviving was no longer enough. I had arrived.